Welcome to the Politics and Media programme. Mahdi Hashi is a London-based care worker with dual British-Somali citizenship, or at least he was until the government withdrew his British citizenship. He claims that the government acted after he refused to spy for MI5. He is now missing, and his family fear that he's being held in a US special rendition camp near Djibouti. This letter was received by Mahdi's family from the British government after he disappeared.
As the Secretary of State, I hereby give notice in accordance with Section 40, Paragraph 5 of the British Nationality Act 1981 that I intend to have an order made to deprive you, Mahdi Mohammed Hashi, of your British citizenship under Section 40, Paragraph 2 of the Act. This is because I am satisfied that it would be conducive to the public good to do so. The reason for this decision is that the Security Service assessed that you have been involved in Islamist extremism and present a risk to the national security of the United Kingdom due to your extremist activities.
Well, to discuss the case, I'm joined by Mahdi Hashi's solicitor, Sagir Hussain, Professor Bill Baring from Birkbeck College, London, and on the phone by Valentina Soria of the Royal United Services Institute. Welcome to the programme, all of you. Sagir, this is an incredible case. You'd think it was fiction if you didn't know it to be fact. What's the background?
Well, the background is it's actually quite well documented. It had received a wide media profile when it first came to prominence in 2009. And the issue was a group of boys from Somali origin from North London have been asked to spy on their community. And these boys resisted. And the kind of pressure they were put under, I think included where one of them was told, even his wife was pregnant, that, oh, we know what the sex of your baby is, and even he didn't even know. I think there were those kind of sort of real intrusive behaviour by people claiming to be from the security services. So that's kind of harassment they've been receiving for a number of years. And I think recently we understand that Mr. Hashi actually, got fed up, and he thought, well, just wanted to take a break. He's got family in Somalia, and while he's away, this letter arrives, and it's a well-known modus operandi, actually, where a number of other people have in the past as well. They've been harassed in this country. As soon as they've gone out to the country, a letter has arrived, which making it very difficult for them to actually sort of follow through, give proper instructions to their lawyers, and act upon it. And the letter they receive is saying you no longer have British citizenship. Absolutely. Full stop. You are no longer a British citizen. You can't come back to this country. So it creates a sort of serious issue for the individual to actually deal with, to address the problem.
Bill, what's going on here? I mean, how does the government have the power to withdraw somebody's citizenship when they're outside of the country without going to court?
Well, this is a power that was introduced, or at least it was streamlined, after the July 2005 events. And so it's in an amendment from 2006. This is the situation where somebody has been naturalised a British citizen, so people who have dual nationality, of whom there are quite a few. And previously, under the British Nationality Act, the Secretary of State had to be satisfied that the conduct of the person concerned was seriously prejudicial to the vital interests of the United Kingdom. That actually meant spying. So this was to get rid of people who had been naturalised British citizens, then caught spying, and they could be got rid of. And that was changed in 2006 to conducive to the public good. And that is the widest discretion you can possibly imagine. So as you say, somebody who's been through the mill, has been granted British citizenship, can have it removed just like that on the basis of just about anything.
And in this case, Sagir, I mean, without wishing to parody the situation, it's almost as if he's been caught refusing to spy. I mean, because there's this background to it where he's asked to spy, he refuses to do so, and then this process takes place. Is that correct?
Well, this is what we feel. We feel this is the execution of the threat that was made to him in 2009, that if you don't do what we tell you to do, there will be horrible consequences to follow. And indeed, they are horrible. We know he's in custody somewhere in prison in Djibouti. We think he's been renditioned to another American facility. But we've had no luck. We have no answer whatsoever where he is. And first and foremost, the family are begging the government to look, at least check for his welfare, to see he's okay, he's alive, he's been treated okay. And then obviously we'll have other issues that will follow through. But at the moment, they just need to know news about him, that he's alive.
And I suppose that what's happening here really is if the government knows that he's in Somalia, which they are more than aware of the conditions in that country, withdrawing his citizenship is essentially to chuck him to the wolves.
Well, this is how blatant it seems. And so we're asking questions at the moment. We're seeking further answers and clarifications from the Home Secretary. And no doubt, the family will be looking at that and will sort of take it from there.
Valentina, let me just bring you into discussion here. Is this a pattern which you recognise as being beyond this single case? Is it something which is happening more generally?
We know that since the introduction of this new power, there have been, several cases around, 15 more or less of, individuals who've had their citizenship revoked by, the Home Secretary for, the reasons never probably made public, as it were, but, it's generally the case that this power is exercised when, as Professor Boring was saying, when these individuals are judged to be a threat to national security, or at least, for reasons of public order and something that is conducive to public order in some ways. It's difficult for me to get into the specifics of this case because, unfortunately, it's not that much in terms of what is actually available in the public and known in the public domain. I would be surprised if this power was actually exercised on the basis of Mr. Hashi's refusal to exclusively on his refusal to work together, collaborate, assist MI5 in gathering relevant intelligence on specific cases. It's a power that generally needs to be a sort of strong legal case for the Home Secretary to exercise this power, and simply not accepting to work for MI5, I don't think is ground enough to take legal action or similar measures against individual. Again, it's been done already. For example, one of the most prominent cases, more recent cases, was Bilal al-Bajawi, who a UK Lebanese citizen who actually was killed in last January while fighting alongside al-Shabaab, and so he actually, on the basis of the intelligence received about this individual, that he was actually on the ground fighting for al-Shabaab, he had his citizenship revoked by the Home Secretary at the time.
So if you're saying that there has to be an additional case, what do you think? And perhaps you have some knowledge of what it might be in comparison with other cases.
Really, the point is, as I said, this in similar cases, the decision has been taken on the basis of what that particular individual would represent in terms of, generally the Home Secretary, exerts this power when an individual is judged by, as I said, intelligence, or there is intelligence which suggests that that individual may represent a kind of threat to national security, or, as I said, maybe, the removal of his citizenship would actually serve the public interest to some extent. And again, we're always talking about, issues related to national security to some extent. Whether this was the case for Mr. Hashi as well, it's difficult at this point to tell. It is, however, likely that MI5 approached Mr. Hashi and his friends on the basis, again, of the information possibly available on them. It's very unlikely that MI5 would approach people just on the basis that they are part of a specific community without necessarily having information pointing to the involvement, or at least, the possibility of these individuals being connected or, with extremist activities, or even just being linked to individuals who may be connected or may be part of or may have been involved in more extremist or illegal activity, either here or overseas.
Okay, well, let me just bring Sigir back in here, because, we can't get into the details of this particular case, but it seems to me that if the government were to make the case that it's made in other similar cases that this was an involvement, and we've seen from the film they are in fact saying involvement in extremist behaviour. It's a slight catch-22 for them, because if it was so extreme, why were they trying to recruit him to MI5? It must be an issue here.
Well, this is why I respectfully disagree with your colleague regarding the rosy picture she's painted about the security services always working with evidence. It's not like that, and we have a situation at cage prisons, for example, where numerous people have contacted us and told us the kind of conversations they have, the money they're offered, the threats they're given, etc., etc. It's a constant harassment, and it really is like, you get these glazed window salesmen who have targets to meet. You almost feel sorry for the individuals on the ground working for the security services, that they are so desperate to get a result. And what in reality happens is that those street conversations on the corners, outside their houses, etc., happen. Threats are made, and I've received phone calls from people just on the street saying, look, I'm just being chased by somebody here. This guy won't let me go. And we try to have a conversation. Look, let's try this formally. Let's do it professionally. But it's almost real desperation to get the numbers, to get the figures. And that label of extremism in itself is very important to challenge, because it's not really defined. And how are you an extremist? And arguably, we're extremists here because we're pushing something out Islam channel that is contradictory to British foreign policy. And the added problem is that everything is done in secret. The Home Secretary may well have a good case, but why don't you not present that case in open, show the public, let the people decide? Because the consequences of this secret evidence is, as it happened in Bilal Barjavi and others, that people are forced, harassed into leaving this country, and consequently end up, as Bilal Barjavi did, being droned, killed. So that's execution without a due process. So the consequences are extremely serious. And my concern is that we have our Prime Minister who said when they came to power, we apologise for being complicit in the torture of British citizens or British subjects. Yet now we appear to be complicit in something that leads to the execution of people. So I think there's a real big debate that is going to happen.
Bill, how can it be that we have a process which affects an individual's life so fundamentally as this, and the government doesn't have to go through a legal process to put it in place?
Yeah, this is, the way that the law has now been changed. And if I can just repeat that previously there was a very specific test which was seriously prejudicial to the vital interests of the UK. So that was the basis upon which the Home Secretary could exercise his power. Now she simply has herself to think that the person's having citizenship is not conducive to the public good, and that is that. Could I just add that I work closely with CAMPAC, the campaign against criminalising communities, and there's been a lot of credible evidence over the past few years of precisely this kind of thing happening with members of the Kurdish community, for example, this kind of pressure, these kind of threats, in order to get them to inform on behalf of the security service. And there are other communities in London which are involved in self-determination issues in the countries from which they came. And exactly the same kind of thing is happening.
And so is there a process now where this can be dragged back into the light of day, so to say? It's a completely hidden process that the government takes in order to remove people's citizenship. Is there now a legal process that can get this back into a court?
Well, she has this power. Of course, any exercise of administrative power can be challenged, but you need very good, determined lawyers, like the one sitting next to me, in order to be able to take this kind of thing up. And then the government are always extremely reluctant to disclose anything. And as we speak, they're trying to change the law to make it even more difficult.
Yeah, that's the issue here. It's very important to be brought up, the issue of secret evidence. We don't know. If they could give us the evidence, people may well support them, may well have confidence in the whole process. It's also secretive, and we heard from what happened with a lot of the detainees who subsequently ended up leading the government in Libya, where it was just, a lot of it was done actually to become friends with Gaddafi, to get the oil contracts. It wasn't necessarily for the interests of this country. And this is why I think we have concerns about the whole secret process. And one of the very important points is this, is that those of us who practice terrorism laws have noticed that the threshold, the bar for actually depriving somebody of their liberty in a criminal process is actually getting much lower. And then you have the civil process where it's even lower. Yet, these people have never been prosecuted. Hashi's never been brought to a court in this country. So we've got to ask ourselves, if the threshold is so low, what reality, I think the government must know you have to assume they know that they have no chance of persuading public opinion in this country that there's a case against this person, deprive them of their citizenship or deprive them of their liberty. And this is why I think they're using these underhand tactics, which really need to be reformed.
Valentina, do you think that is the case, that there's a kind of a creeping use of governmental power which is essentially beyond the legal process?
I mean, of course, it's a very, interesting point in terms of, what it's legal or illegal, what is actually behind, the what is actually publicly acceptable to some extent, always in relation to issues of national security and so on. I think that it's in relation to the fact that we're talking about secret evidence. I mean, many of these decisions are taken on the basis of evidence collected by intelligence agencies, and therefore is secret in nature, in essence. It's, of course, I mean, this is the very tricky part of the whole thing. Of course, the fact that it is secret evidence, it has to be maintained secret in order to avoid exposing, human sources and, methods of intelligence gathering. And this has always been the case and will remain the case. At the end of the day, this is what really makes, in an era basically where we're actually trying to, we see, the public or, pushing for more transparency of intelligence agencies, and then trying to, at the same time, on the other hand, try to open up more in order to become more accountable and, responsible to what the public asks. This tendency between secrecy and civil liberty is inevitable, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily. I agree with the point that if was this evidence more available in the open and actually made available and to the public, may actually end up actually legitimizing what the intelligence agencies do in most cases. I'm not necessarily saying that everything that intelligence agencies here in the UK or elsewhere do is correct or not. I think again, it's a very tricky part of the whole argument, and it's down to the possibility of actually intelligence agency proving that some individuals are a threat to national security for them to gain that enough support.
Bill, do you accept the argument that we often hear, and Valentina's referred to it, that we often hear from the government that there should be certain categories which are beyond the legal system? I mean, surely it was one of the foundational moments of the English justice system in the 17th century when it was no longer possible for reasons of state to make hidden accusations against people, and that they should be tried in open court.
Well, it's the case of John Lilburne a long way back. So the question of secret evidence on which he was tried and tortured, and a secret court, the Star Chamber, and that was what the English Civil War was all about in part. So I think in this country we do everything we possibly can to see that when a very serious step is taken in relation to someone's life, like revoking their citizenship, that there is due process. And this is a big issue also with terrorist lists, for example. And there's a big row continuing as to whether somebody who, on the basis of who knows what evidence, is deprived of the possibility of living a normal life. Or in this case, this kind of case is so much worse in a way, because it's, as my colleague says, it's execution, effectively, then there should be due process. And if there's evidence which is so secret that it can't be disclosed, then a judge should be deciding that.
I know we won't get into the details of this specific case, but in general, how difficult is it for someone who finds themselves in this kind of situation, for a lawyer like you representing them, how difficult is it to get this back into a process where it can be judged and perhaps overturned? Well,
let me mention the case of Bilal Barjawi, which Valentina mentioned earlier. I know Bilal Barjawi, and I knew him, and he actually instructed myself to actually challenge his deprivation of his citizenship. So we have this unique situation where somebody had been accused of being a major terrorist is desperately ringing and calling us and said, look, I really want to come back to England. I didn't want to leave. I was pushed out of the country and I really want to come back to England. Now, that's not a sign of some major Al-Qaeda jihadists, as the government or the security services will wish to sort of paint the picture. And so far, they have been able to do that. What they'll do is they'll release certain information to certain security correspondents, and before you know it, we have a sort of a narrative on an individual that's never actually been challenged in a court of law. And the difficulty with challenging that is the whole issue of obtaining instructions from abroad where they are. Either they're in prison or they're in some remote area where there's difficulty with getting access. And the other problem we have is the one where, from a lawyer's point of view, well, can we guarantee their safety when they're giving us instructions from abroad? Will we have any real, genuine effect on this case? So not only the fact that it's secret evidence is so secretive that the Home Secretary doesn't want to share with anybody, and then we have the situation where the client himself has difficulty of giving instructions to his solicitor. So the whole process, it's almost like predetermined to make it impossible.
So I mean, Bill, oddly enough, we are almost in a kind of pre-modern situation where people can be pushed into a kind of legal black hole, put in a place of detention, and it's extraordinarily difficult on Sagir's account to get redress.
Well, here we are, and this is yet another example, because we had the kind of knee-jerk reactions after 9/11, where a whole structure of putting people onto terrorist lists and freezing them was constructed. We have this itself, this process now, this extraordinary exercise of discretion, was a reaction following July 2005. And each time what we have is a major blow to things which have been fought for centuries, as a matter of fact. And it's all happening rather quickly.
Sagir, briefly, do you think that something that the government is doing here is supposed to be a sort of general message to the Muslim community about terrorism? Do you think it's a kind of psychological, political process as well as a legal one?
It may be. I do wonder at times when some of the legislation we've seen over the years whether our parliamentarians actually do sit back and think the consequences. And we saw the Extradition Act, we saw the various other pieces of legislation. So I'm not necessarily sure whether all these processes are thought through, but the impact is quite important. We have a large percentage, a significant percentage of people in this country who have backgrounds rather than being generations in this country for centuries. And really the message is that, you're not really a citizen like the people who were here for decades or the generations, so that we can still take this away from you. And that has far wider implications for multiculturalism, the whole issue of people from immigrant communities, whether they will ever become actual British citizens or it's conditioned linked to their citizenships. And that's the kind of message that's going across now. And I think our job is to reassure people that there are plenty of people in this country, whether it's even people like the Mail and other politicians, who do
raise this issue.
Who recognise that the government uses and the security services is using the current war on terror to grab more and more powers, which will be used far more widely than just the sort of small minority of people who think, well, perhaps they have foreign links. And a lot of people are a bit ambiguous as to sort of their real feelings towards them. But I think it's a wide trend developing. And my fear is that it will end up like it's happened in France, where ruthlessly they would pick people up, throw them to Tunisia, throw them to Algeria, where they've been severely treated by the authorities.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to bring the conversation to a close there, but my thanks to Bill Bowring and Sagir Hussain and to Valentina Soria for joining us on the phone. This is the end of the first part of the Politics and Media programme, but we will be back after the break discussing the effect of mental health politics on ethnic minority communities, so do rejoin us after the ads.